Well, Dan Perry is the former chief editor of Associated Press in Europe, Middle East and Africa. Joins us now from Tel Aviv. Good to have you with us. So how much media coverage have the proceedings in the ICJ got in the Israeli media?
I have to tell you, very little.
And is that something that reflects a lack of, I mean, what do you put that down to, that people don't see it as something that really is of issue?
A number of things. First of all, there's a real awareness here that the ICJ has no powers of implementation and fundamentally is pretty widely ignored by countries that end up being ruled against at the ICJ. Secondly, they're so distracted by the extremely messy situation in Gaza, which also, of course, attaches to a different case before the ICJ. That really has priority. The West Bank in general is currently on a back burner. I think there's also a strong feeling in Israel that the West Bank issue is political and not so legal. Not so much a matter of legalities. And I understand very well that there's a narrative, especially in the Arab world, and one that has been adopted in much of, certainly the developing world, that would argue otherwise. But Israel has a case that is truly more than a quibble, and I've examined it pretty closely as to why we have basically a situation of limbo that may be unfair to the Palestinians, that may be messy for everyone, that actually is dangerous for Israel as well, but that isn't really a clear-cut case of international legality. And by the way, despite all the noise about the illegalities, the supposed illegality of Israeli settlements, and again, I'm not here to defend them at all, international courts have not really ruled on this issue. The ICJ itself, for example, when it met in 2004 about the security fence, did indeed claim the settlements were illegal, but didn't rule on the illegality of the entire occupation. And also, I have to add, Israel's main concern as regards the West Bank is security. The West Bank envelops Jerusalem on three sides. The West Bank comes within 20 miles, 30 kilometers of Tel Aviv, the country's largest metropolis with about 3 million people metro area. It is a strategic highland, and one can only imagine what would happen if they simply pulled out of the West Bank because the ICJ called it illegal. Hamas, or some version of Hamas, took over the West Bank and began bombarding Israel from there, and perhaps trying to invade Israel from there and do massacres in nearby communities, which now would be Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. I think it's safe to say that the Israelis currently have other fish to fry.
Now we're seeing at the ICJ the breadth, you could say, of global perspective and opinion that is very much opposed to the Israeli occupation. Are you seeing any sign that this has any impact on Israeli policymakers so far?
Look, Israel knows very well that its occupation of the West Bank, and in particular its settlement of the West Bank or parts of the West Bank, is one of the few things that can unite most of the planet in consensus on any particular issue, even more so than Ukraine, much more so than Ukraine. And they're not happy about it, but they also, frankly, consider it to be a little bit rich when countries around the world, when the Soviet Union, which was the largest landmass on the planet, would deride Israel for alleged imperialism and expansionism for its 20-kilometer wide ambition in the West Bank, or indeed, and I beg your forgiveness, but when the Arab countries that are not exactly stampeding over each other to give independence to the Kurds, who are much more distinct and larger people than the Palestinians, or the Assyrians or the Mamelukes, obsess quite so much about the Palestinians and pay no mind that is apparent to Israel's really profound security problem, they tend to ignore it. That said, there's a reason why Israel never annexed the West Bank. They know there's a problem. They really, really do.
This is not just, of course,
the majority in Israel that would like to fix it.
This is not just an Arab narrative. Let me quote to you what Beit Salem says, as you know, an Israeli human rights group. They say Israel's, and I'm quoting here, Israel's regime of apartheid and occupation is inextricably bound up in human rights violations. Now, for most Israelis, do they follow the logic that I think you're explaining, that, well, if Arab countries and other countries commit human rights violations, it's okay for us to commit not only human rights violations, but what Israeli human rights group says, apartheid and occupation?
We have a situation here that defies simple narratives. I think most Israelis understand that because of their security claim to the West Bank, their security concerns in the West Bank that have caused them to occupy the Palestinians in the West Bank, they've created a lot of enemies there. They have a real security problem. When they deal with that problem, they oppress the Palestinians. They know it's a fiasco. On the other hand, they've yet to hear a really good idea how to pull out of the West Bank without facing a potential Hamas invasion, this time from close to their cities. Now, if it were possible, in my view, to address the security concern convincingly, I think you'd still have a majority in Israel that would be delighted to get out.
We are really out of time, and I've got the director of my ear saying we're going over. I've got to thank you and leave it there. Thank you so much. Dan Perry there.
Thank you very much. Yeah.